Hi, I'm Jane Farnham, Director at Great British Talent, and welcome to our podcast where you can find out all about our Great British speakers and how they can inspire your team with motivational stories to help you grow your business with key takeaways. So today we're chatting to Paul McGee, widely known as the SUMO Guy. Now, Paul is an internationally recognised motivational speaker and an expert on resilience, leadership and personal development. Paul is also an author of 13 books, clocked up over 4 million views on social media, and has spoken to over 1 million people around the globe in 40 countries. Hey, Paul, you've been very busy, eh? Welcome.
When I hear all that, I sound quite tired, actually, just hearing it. But I'm 60 years old, Jane. I've been around the block a long time. So when you get a chance to, I've been speaking, and I'm passionate about speaking anyway. So I have loved those opportunities that have come my way. It's, from speaking in Sydney to Solihull, from Tehran to Todmorden, it's been quite an interesting journey, I have to say.
Well, I'm going to find out more because it's so lovely. I'm so glad that we're speaking, as I know we haven't spoken, and it's just great to find out more about how you can help our clients really get the best from their business on a corporate level. So for those that aren't in the know, let's go back to basics. What's sumo? Because I automatically always think of Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely nothing to do with Japan. It was a phrase I came across probably getting on for 25 years ago, and it's an acronym that stands for Shut Up, Move On. Started to weave it into some of my talks, but it kind of began to take a life of its own, and it became an umbrella term ultimately to describe a set of ideas that I had been developing and had been evolving for several years. So it's provocative. It gets people's attention. I'm not the guy who's climbed Everest. I haven't got any gold medals. How do you stand out and be memorable in the eyes of people, in the ears of people? And I suppose this rather provocative, slightly quirky brand has managed to do that. So it started off its life simply meaning shut up, move on. We do have an alternative definition for some people who are a little bit uncomfortable with it, think it's a little bit too assertive. So we can also use an alternative definition: stop, understand, move on.
Yeah, that resonates, and I can understand why that would resonate with some people more than the others. Because for me, it's about comprehending and understanding a situation in order to be able to move on. So that's brilliant. But yeah, it just hits, doesn't it? It's a great sort of brand for you to kind of go into a business with. So tell me about it in more detail then. How does it help people with stress and resilience in the workplace?
Well, when you talked earlier on, Jane, you mentioned, how do we grow our business? And I guess where I come in is not as the business consultant, but as the people consultant. We talk a lot about AI, but we need to think about PI, which is, the people intelligence. How do I understand myself? And how do I get the best out of myself? And how do I get the best out of others? So a lot of my tools and ideas that I give to people, I guess I start with very much wanting to give people a bit of an insight about themselves, understanding how stress at times can actually be quite healthy, but too much stress can actually undermine our performance. It can undermine our well-being, and it can hurt our performance as well. So I know when I talk about resilience and well-being, I think some people still have this mindset that it's a bit of a pink and fluffy concept. And I'm not talking about listening to whale music and doing yoga, although you can do all of those. But here's something that's massively important for every employer to appreciate about their staff. If you're going to grow your business, you need to grow your people. But remember, well-being leads to well-doing. And that impacts directly people's performance, their relationships with their colleagues, with their customers, and with their clients. And what I find with my approach, Jane, is the approach tends to be holistic. So I was speaking at Southampton University yesterday, and people are saying, wow, that's going to really help me, particularly with all the change we're going through as an organization. But actually, you've just helped me with something that's going on in my personal life as well. So I want to give people some insights, get them to stop and think. And then I'm looking at some specific tools that can help them deal with the pressures they've got in life.
Yeah, because it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I suppose getting somebody like you in to talk to a group of employees, assuming that they're all having the same problems and the same issues and dealing with things in the same way is utter nonsense because everybody is so different. So I suppose inherently you have to talk to some people on a personal level, for them to be able to make changes in their personal life, which then bleeds into their professional life and, enhances their ability to be able to create good working environments.
Absolutely. I don't think there's. I think you are right in this that we're all unique individuals. We have some commonalities and similarities, but we are unique, and therefore it's not a one size fits all approach. And I suppose where I come in, and there's obviously some brilliant speakers with some amazing backstories who inspire people.
Yeah.
I guess what I do, Jane, is I give you snippets of my story in order to help inform your story.
Mm.
And rather than get people to think about if they've got some issues and challenges, it's very easy to look externally for some solutions. I suppose metaphorically, what I do is I hold up a mirror and say, maybe we need to take a look at ourselves and appreciate that maybe sometimes how we've been doing things. Because when I talk about what does shut up really mean, it's the shh, get off autopilot, stop, think, reflect. And when you think about the pace of work and the pressure of work, I want to give people time to pause. And I do that by holding up that mirror, by exploring some ideas, giving them some insight, sharing some of my stories, some of my challenges, and getting them to think about what's the answer for them. I very much want to equip and empower people rather than come in metaphorically on my white horse as the guru who just, shares my wisdom and then rides off into the sunset. I want people to laugh. I want them to be engaged, but I do want them to look in that mirror and take an honest look at themselves and realize there's loads of stuff they're doing on autopilot without thinking that's really effective. But are there one or two things that we could change that actually, although it might only be a small change, ultimately over time could make a big difference?
So, I suppose every workforce is unique, as also every business is unique. So, do you find that you get asked to go and talk about a problem that they are experiencing, which could be change management, some big change that's happening and everybody's a little bit anxious. And then you find out there's a deeper underlying root cause beneath it that they hadn't really considered. But by giving them the time to reflect, you're helping them understand it a little bit better.
I think I mean, you're right when you talk about the change. I mean, I always say to my clients, to my audiences, the most dangerous place to be right now would be in an organization that's not changing. You want to be a Netflix, not a Blockbuster. And I think there are some big messages around change that I do look at. But I don't come in as like the consultant who's going to unearth issues. I think sometimes just by sharing that spotlight on particular points, I think some of those people realize what the underlying issues are. It's not up for me necessarily to identify them. I just shed the light on certain points, and I think they get the ahas for themselves. Clearly, I think one of the big challenges with change isn't just the employee's response or reaction to it, but it is the leaders and how they lead people through change. And the reality is people can make some big mistakes and be, really ineffective in what they do. But then you explore the fact that actually, how many leaders have actually been equipped to know how to lead people through change? We just think because they've got this title that therefore they've automatically got the behavior and the expertise to know what to do. And we haven't. And so I think one of the biggest causes of stress in people's lives, sometimes there's a lack of clarity, what exactly is expected of me. And secondly, to put it bluntly, if we use another C word, a lack of competence, because my role is changing, but I might not feel brave enough to say, hang on a minute, this is a new role. This is a new way of doing things. I can't automatically just, flick a switch and I can do that. my competence needs to develop. You know, one of the most stressful times of my life ever was in a job many, many years ago when I was working as a bank clerk in the 1980s in central Manchester. Why was I so stressed? Because I lacked competence and I was really struggling. And some people go off sick, and yet the real issue is not mental health. It's a lack of training and support in the workplace to know how to do your job well. So for me, I work across the board with every level of employee, but I do love working with leaders, giving them the tools to get the best out of themselves and get the best out of others.
Yeah, it's a trickle down, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So have you got any practical tools and strategies to help our audience right here, right now, who are watching? We've got a little tip with regards to mental health and well-being, because it's so important. I mean, I've done a huge amount of work in this area myself, and I think it's so valuable. And it staggers me that we grow up, we go into the big wide world without really any, well, I certainly didn't have any tools to be told that actually you might find this a bit hard, and sometimes you need to step back. These really important skills that aren't taught in school. So is there anything, a little thing that is
sure
nugget that
there's two little nuggets I'll share with you. And often when I'm speaking at an event, I'll talk about the power of questions. And I have this postcard with these 7 questions to help you sumo. So faced with an issue or a challenge, depending on the length of time I've got to do my session, I may look at a couple of these questions or look at all 7, because we often think in questions. And so one of my questions is, think of an issue or a challenge going on in your world right now, not a personal tragedy, but an issue or a challenge, and just ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 equals death or the end of the world, where actually is it? Because very often we react to things like they're an 8 or a 9, but deep down they're possibly just a 1 or a 2. Another question to get people to think about is, how important will this be in 6 months' time? Yes, it's a bit of a challenge now, but how you are feeling now will be temporary. And there is, when we're going through a lot of change, what this concept called the messy middle, where you're kind of working through things and you're not seeing immediate results that are positive in terms of the changes you've made. It's the messy middle. However, how important will that be in 6 months' time? And I often say to people, you know, what is out of your comfort zone today in 6 months' time will be part of your comfort zone because you've grown. So I know I've worked with employers and clients who literally 10, 15 years later want to rebook me. And then they go, I've still got your postcard.
Oh, brilliant.
And they've got, because it's a reference point. That's only a couple of questions, but it's those, again, I'm not here just to give you answers. I'm here to empower you to reflect and ask yourself some good questions. Another concept, this is more of an insight, but people find it invaluable. I talk about one of my sumo principles is hippo time is okay. What do hippos do in mud? They wallow. And I actually say to people, it is okay to not always feel okay. To feel mad, bad, or sad about something is entirely legitimate. We're not after a stress-free, anxiety-free quality of life. Because if you had no anxiety or no stress, that would be a very dangerous place to be. Life will throw you challenges. Rather than beat yourself up because I'm not kind of always motoring through every challenge and bouncing off and I'm fine and I'm a tiger, you just say, guess what? I'm a human. And I've got my boundaries, and sometimes I need to digest my disappointment. I need to occasionally process my pain or sit with my sadness. And I think when people know, hey, you might be going through some stuff and having these, what is sometimes described as negative emotions, perfectly legitimate, perfectly okay. However, hippo time, okay? But it's temporary. Yeah. It's a detour. It's not a destination. And what I find is some people end up wallowing for too long and they almost like metaphorically get stuck in the mud. Yeah. And a phrase I sometimes use is life is too short and too precious to spend too long wallowing. So think about those questions, scale of 1 to 10, where 10's death or the end of the world. How important is it? how important will this issue be in 6 months' time? And if I had time, I'd explore the other questions. But also, hippo time. It's okay.
Oh,
And it humanises our experience. And people are different. Some people need hippo time longer than others for whatever reason. But knowing that you're allowed some, but also it's temporary and it's a detour, not a destination, I find people find that really, really helpful.
Oh, I do too. I mean, I don't think there's any such thing as a negative emotion. It's just an emotion. We all
Absolutely, but it gets labelled as a negative emotion, doesn't it?
I think it's like I always say, ride those waves, because life is one big wave. And rather than just push through, sometimes you need to feel the rawness to kind of move through something and shift your focus. And there was a lovely quote. I can't remember it word for word, but Eckhart Tolle. I remember seeing it yesterday, and he said, the biggest issues aren't the problems themselves, it's how we think about them.
Absolutely, 100%.
Beautiful, because you just get caught up in your own head, don't you, sometimes, instead of, just sitting back and reflecting and really thinking through how big is this, which is what
and the questions are a tool to get you to think about that problem in a different way. Even to the point, one of my questions is, how can I influence or improve the situation? Because sometimes we get so stuck on the problem that we're not actually, okay, let's acknowledge there's a problem, but can we now spend some time and energy thinking about the solution? I spent some time a few years ago working with Stephen Covey, wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he talked about the fact, he talked about the fact that people can spend a lot of time. One of his ideas is be proactive. He talks about your circle of concern, things that concern you, but you've got no control over. And then you've got your circle of influence, things you can do. But he said, sometimes if we're not careful, we spend too much time and energy thinking about, talking about, sometimes worrying about or moaning about the stuff we can't do anything about. And although we do need to vent and offload about some of our concerns, there comes a point you've got to say, okay, so what's the plan? What do we do now? What's in our, I call it your green zone, that circle of influence, and just acknowledge there are things out of your control. Let go of that and focus more on what you can do rather than what you can't do. And that idea, which I share with people, has helped me in my business. It's helped me in promoting some of my books. It's just this sense in which, come on, you've had your hippo time. What's in the green zone, that circle of influence? Let's focus on the solution rather than keep moaning about the problem.
But let's face it, Paul, we'll always meet people who will find a problem for every solution that you offer.
Indeed. But it takes some courage, though, to want to actually move forward to look at a solution. Everyone can stand on the sideline pointing out where things are going wrong. We'll get in the arena and start trying to make a few things go right.
Well, listen, just before we go, I was just wondering if you can share any real world examples of how you and SUMO has made a lasting impact on an organisation or even an individual that you've met.
Well, if I can share a couple of examples. One is of a client who I've worked with for quite a while. They're in the healthcare sector. And they said, having heard me speak, they actually took a number of my ideas and they made them, they now have a resource room in their actual hospital. And this resource room, they took some pictures of some of the resources. So there's a hippo there. There's something I talk about, your red and your blue cat, based on the work of Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. There's a beach ball. There's a yellow T-shirt with the word victim on it. And I talk about don't wear the T-shirt. And they also have in the resource room, right on the sort of like above the door, stop, understand, move on. And it's become part of their culture and their language. If I was to share a personal example, I was once working working for a carpet manufacturer, and they gave me a tour of their actual factory. And it was probably about 6 or 7 years later, I was working in a school, and a woman came up to me and she said, "It's great to see you again." I said, "Oh, when have our paths crossed?" She said, "I used to work in a factory operating a machine to make carpets, and I heard you speak. And I always wanted to get into teaching. And when I heard you speak and you use this phrase about, don't leave your dreams in the bin, or carpe diem, seize the day." She said, I decided literally the week after you spoke at our company that I was going to explore what steps I actually needed to do to actually become a teacher. And she said, when I knew you were coming to speak at our school, I just couldn't wait to see you again. And that's, if I'd never gone to that school, I wouldn't have known that story. And I think there's quite a few stories that we don't always appreciate or hear of how, words change worlds.
Yeah.
The words we say to ourselves, but also the words we say to other people. So I've got plenty more, but that hopefully that'll keep you going, Jane.
I know, that's lovely. It's been such a delight talking to you, Paul. It's just a power of positivity. It's lovely, a powerhouse. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks, Jane.
And if you'd like to book Paul and come and help your leaders inspire their employees, or simply inspire your employees to learn, to grow, to take time out, to understand and actually become more resilient and work well under pressure, then do call us. You can call 01753 439 289 or you can email me direct, jane@greatbritishtalent.com. Thank you.